There's an old joke from Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles. A man is walking down the street in Belfast, and suddenly he's dragged into an alleyway by a masked gang of armed men. They point at his head and ask, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" Now, the man doesn't know which answer gets him out of this alive. So he hedges his bets and says, "I'm an atheist." The leader of the gang looks at him and says, Yeah, but are you a Catholic atheist or a Protestant atheist?" Now, there's a second story, supposedly from a book called The Bible in Spain, attributed to George Borrow. A Protestant missionary in the Spanish countryside hears a local peasant absolutely tearing the Catholic Church apart. The priests, the bishops, the Pope, the whole thing. And the missionary thinks, aha, perfect, this one's easy, he's ripe for conversion. So he starts laying out the case for Protestantism, right? No submission to Rome, no hierarchy, pure faith, and the peasant stops him and says, listen, I don't even believe in the one true church. How in hell am I supposed to believe in yours? Now, what do these two stories have in common? They're both pointing at something strange, something oxymoronic, something that goes way beyond theology or metaphysics, something far more prosaic. And today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. In case you haven't been paying attention, Catholicism is in fashion. We just witnessed the largest wave of conversions to the Catholic Church in over 20 years. Young people are either returning to the faith or converting in droves. The New York Times published a piece calling the Catholic Church New York's hottest club. The four presidential frontrunners for 2028 from both parties are all Catholic. Something is clearly going on. But this video is not about why that's happening. I'll save that for another one. What I want to do today is something different. I want to offer a gentle reminder, a kind of anthropological memo of what Catholicism actually looks like when it becomes ubiquitous, when its dogmas become so psychologically entrenched that they stop being beliefs and start being just the background of life itself. When its truths become so obvious, they turn into common sense. This is my attempt as a Hispanic to show you what a Catholic existence looks like, even in the absence of faith. This video is, in effect, about being Catholic without necessarily believing in God. Now, that phrase is going to bother some of you. I can already feel it. And honestly, that's totally fair. In literal terms, it's an oxymoron. Catholic and atheist, at first glance, don't really go together. And yet, the expression keeps coming back. A softer version is cultural Catholic, which is older and less controversial. But I'll get to why it doesn't fully satisfy me either. The man usually credited with first articulating this intuition is Charles Maurras, French thinker, writer, politician, who argued it was worth recovering Catholicism even as a non-believer. He was condemned by the Pope for it, naturally. And yes, Maurras is a complicated figure for a number of other reasons, but in genealogical terms, he's the origin point of this idea. Now, why doesn't cultural Catholic quite cut it for me? Because of what Gustavo Bueno, the great Spanish materialist philosopher, points out. Culture today means everything and therefore nothing. It covers how cucumbers are grown in a village, Beethoven, indigenous rituals, and brunch habits all at once. When a word does that much work, it stops doing any work at all, essentially. So I much prefer the framework offered by Italian philosopher Mario Perniola, who wrote a book called Del Sentire Cattolico. You could translate it as on Catholic feeling. His argument Catholicism not as faith, not as doctrine, but as a mode of feeling, a way of being in the world. That's a bit closer to what we're after. It allows us to escape the problem of culture, which serves for way too many things. And yet, it is true that feeling also has its risks because it could slide into sentimentalism or easy emotionalism. And then there's the bolder formulation, the one used by Gustavo Bueno himself, and before him by Jorge Santayana, the man from Avila who emigrated to the United States, and also by Oriana Fallaci, the combative Italian journalist, and by Gianni Battimo, coming from a completely different philosophical direction. All of them, totally different thinkers, converge on the same expression: Catholic atheism. Here's a statistic I find endlessly fascinating. In the Netherlands, 72% of Catholics describe themselves as atheist or agnostic. Holland, one of the most multicultural societies in Europe, organized politically around the divide between Protestants, Catholics, liberals, and socialists. And when you go to the Catholic column and ask how many actually believe, it's 28%. In purely sociological terms, Catholic atheism is not an abstraction. It describes millions of real people. Now, I want to be honest with you. This apparent contradiction, being Catholic and not believing, has never felt entirely alien to me personally. And I think I know why. There's a passage in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 20 through 24, that I keep coming back to. A father brings his sick child to Jesus and begs for help. Jesus says, quote, "Everything is possible to one who has faith," end quote. And the father, in what I think is one of the most honest lines in the entire New Testament, cries out, quote, "I do believe. Help my unbelief," end quote. So do you believe or don't you? Well, both, right? And that's precisely where the drama lies. Unamuno, one of the great Spanish philosophers, built an entire book around that tension, the agony of Christianity. The word agony here comes from the Greek agon, a struggle, a contest, not death, a living fight. And Unamuno felt that text in his bones. I believe and I don't believe. And in asking for help, I'm already believing in some way, but I'm asking precisely because I don't have faith. And here's the philosophical point underneath all of this. Faith, hope, and charity are theological virtues. And if you go back to Aristotle, virtues are never binary. It's not either you have all the courage or none of it at all. Virtues are habits, dispositions, things that are acquired, strengthened, practiced, and yes, lost. They oscillate. So faith oscillates too. When I have faith, I'm also fighting against doubt. When I have hope, despair is right there alongside it. When I practice charity, it doesn't instantly turn me into some kind of universal hippie. Seen that way, Catholic atheist stops being a contradiction and starts being just honest. And if you want a more philosophical frame, Wittgenstein gives us one. Lebensform, form of life, a way of inhabiting the world that goes deeper than any single belief. All right, so what does this Catholic form of life actually consist of? I'm going to walk you through 6 points. Number 1, the confidence that we can all improve. See, this sounds really simple, but it has enormous consequences, and it becomes crystal clear the moment you compare the Catholic Theology of Grace with the Lutheran and the Calvinist versions. The matter is enormously complex, and the experts themselves acknowledge this. The Theology of Grace is complicated both in Catholicism and in Protestantism, but there is indeed an important difference, because if there were not, well, what happened would not have happened. Perhaps we can grasp that difference through a Lutheran motto: simul justus et peccator, simultaneously just and sinner. How is this possible? Well, because I am just on God's side, who justifies me through Christ. And at the same time, I remain a sinner because the human being is by definition sinful. Luther lived this tension in a very intense way, even psychologically. He read Paul's letter to the Romans and finds relief. Even though I remain a sinner, God declares me just through Christ. I'm covered. The sin stays, but God's declaration overrides it. The classic image for this, and while not directly from Luther, it captures the logic, is this: a pile of garbage covered by snow. God doesn't remove the garbage, he simply covers it in white. It looks clean from the outside, but underneath, the filth remains. You see, Catholicism says that can't be right. Because yes, we're justified by faith, but justification cannot be separated from sanctification. When grace touches you, it changes you. You don't stay exactly as sinful as before with a simple declaration pasted on top. You are actually genuinely being transformed. Insofar as I am justified, I am also transformed. In the Eastern Christian tradition, they use the term theosis, divinization, the radical idea that the Christian is called to become like God. Catholicism uses the language of sanctification, but the logic is the same. Grace is not cosmetic, it's constitutive. Take this one step further to Calvin, double predestination. God has decided from all eternity that specific peoples are saved and specific peoples are damned. Those people are already determined, already fixed. Think about what that does to how you look at other people. If the person in front of you might be predestined for hell and there's nothing you or they can do about it, then a radical confidence in the other becomes very hard to sustain. The other becomes, at minimum, a question mark, a possible threat. I sometimes call this the bubble children mindset, each person sealed inside their own sphere, where the other is an intruder, a potential invader of my space, my freedom, my security. And this is not abstract. Hobbes comes right out of this world. Man is a wolf to man, and if the other is fundamentally dangerous, then you need a Leviathan state to keep everyone separated and controlled. It's not a coincidence that during COVID, you saw so many supposed libertarians suddenly become enthusiastic supporters of mass lockdowns. When the other is primarily a threat, the state shows up as the only protector. There's also something else. When the human being becomes increasingly animal-like in your anthropology, irredeemably corrupt, fallen beyond repair, the line between human and animal starts to blur. It's no coincidence then that animalist theories, which radically equate humans with other animals, tend to flourish in these very same cultural ecosystems. Catholicism offers the opposite vision. All of us are called to holiness. All of us. Not some predetermined elect. Everyone. And since God doesn't call anyone to the impossible, everyone is capable of it. We are surrounded not by inevitably damned souls, but by possible saints. That changes everything about how you move through the world. And it includes the dolce vita, right? The good life. How you eat, how you drink, how you talk at the table, how you share an evening. Everyday life matters because every moment of a life is a moment in which sanctification can happen. It's not an accident that we associate this warmth with Catholic countries, Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, rather than with, say, Finland or Lithuania. Number 2, attention to each person for their own sake. If every single person is a possible saint, if every human being carries in them something inexhaustible, then you can never really reduce them to a label. You can never close the file. This is the theological grounding of what Mario Perniola identifies as the two striking visible features of Catholicism. The first, privileged attention to the poor. The poor person is not a failure, not lazy, not predestined to misery, not a statistic. They are a concrete person who deserves attention, not because of what they can offer back, but because of what they are, essentially. The image you want to hold in your mind here is the Hospital de la Caridad in Sevilla, one of the most beautiful Baroque buildings in Spain, a house of stunning art, and at the same time, an institution dedicated entirely to serving the poor. The members of the brotherhood that ran it referred to the people they served as, and I love this, our masters and lords. Not clients, not users, not beneficiaries. Masters and lords. The second feature is even more radical: the souls in purgatory. Purgatory is uniquely Catholic, and what it asks of you is extraordinary. Devote your prayers, your charity, your time to beings who cannot give you anything back. A poor man might one day thank you. The dead cannot. And yet Catholicism insists, pray for them anyway. Pay attention even to those from whom no benefit can come. That is profoundly anti-cynical, profoundly anti-utilitarian. And if you think that cynicism and utilitarianism are just abstract philosophical positions, I mean, look around. They're the water we swim in. The Catholic voice that says this person matters in themselves is, in our current moment, genuinely countercultural. Number 3, giving and receiving reasons. Catholicism has a deep, almost structural obsession with logos, with arguing, with dialogue, with sitting down and exchanging reasons. You only have to look at the weight of the philosophical tradition it has generated. Gustavo Bueno made this point repeatedly. Among the world religions, Catholicism is simply the most rational. And this isn't just about the towering metaphysics of a Thomas Aquinas. It's about conversation at the dinner table. It's about the culture of debate. Logos isn't only the philosophical treatise. It's also the word, the dialogue, the communal working through of ideas, preferably with a glass of wine. This also shows up in the very structure of the Catholic Church: the Church triumphant, the Church penitent, and the Church militant. You do not save yourself alone. Salvation is not a monologue. It is a polyphony. You need the sacraments, the saints, the community, the magisterium, a whole plurality of mediations. A phrase from the Operarios Diocesanos captures this perfectly. We are not destined to save ourselves alone. Now contrast this with sola scriptura, the Protestant Reformation's insistence that the individual read scripture for themselves, interpret it themselves, answer to no one but God directly. On one level, that sounds like liberation. On another level, it slides naturally, almost inevitably, into moral subjectivism. You have your values, I have mine. You think this, I think that. Everything becomes a matter of personal taste. And when we stop trusting that reason can settle moral questions, when morality becomes just flavor preference, we end up turning to the state as the final arbiter. Hobbes again. Gustavo Bueno actually connects this to a profound ontological difference between Christianity and Islam. Islam insists radically on the absolute undivided unity of God. Christianity introduces plurality into God himself, the Holy Trinity, and in Christ, a double nature, divine and human simultaneously. To many people, this seems less rational, more complicated, more contradictory. Gustavo Bueno saw the exact opposite. That plurality at the foundation of reality enables a richer, less reductive, and more pluralist ontology. The complexity isn't a bug, it's the feature. That's why there is no Christianity without Athens. There is no pure original Christianity that was later contaminated by Greek philosophy. Christianity is also Greek. Ratzinger made this case forcefully. Jerusalem, Athens, and Rome. Without Athens, no rational elaboration. Without Rome, no civilizational institution. Without Jerusalem, no revealed root. Remove any of the three and the whole thing collapses. Protestantism's break with Rome was also, in many of its forms, a break with Athens. And once Christianity is severed from both institutional universality and metaphysical reason, what remains is not primitive Christianity, but a sort of hollowed out and pasteurized Christianity, scriptural, moral, inward, and yet poorer in ontology, easily absorbed into bourgeois individualism. Number 4, a worldly gaze, but one not limited to the everyday. The Jesuits had a formula in the 17th century attributed to the Ignatian spirit that I think is one of the most beautiful things ever written about how to live. Quote, not to be constrained by the greatest, and yet to be fully concentrated in the smallest. That is the divine. End quote. Hold both the grand and the minute simultaneously. This also shows up in one of the funniest anecdotes about Saint Teresa of Avila. A nun, while cleaning partridges in the kitchen, announces she's having visions. Teresa replies, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, quote, when it is visions, visions, when it is partridges, partridges, end quote. In other words, right now, clean the damn partridges. There will be time for mystical ecstasy later. That combination of soaring mysticism and total earthly practicality is profoundly Catholic. Teresa was one of the greatest mystics in all of human history, and an extraordinarily concrete, practical woman, an organizer, a founder of convents, a relentless traveler who got things done. The theological root of all of this is the incarnation. The body matters. We are our bodies, not trapped inside them, not accidentally wrapped in them. So thoroughly embodied that the resurrection itself will also be bodily. This explains the importance of relics. A bone, a finger, a sandal, a cloth touched by a saint. Matter has been dignified. The physical world is not a distraction from the sacred, it is its very site. Now, this attention to the bodily can degenerate. It can become a sort of corporatism, right? Excessive loyalty to our own. The in-group, the clan, that's a real risk. But it's the risk you run when you overcome individualism. You can overcorrect into tribalism. The answer isn't to abandon the bodily, but to be clear-eyed about the temptation. I love that St. Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologiae, the most systematic work of medieval theology, probably the most systematic work of theology of all time, discusses the remedies against sadness. The full list is weeping, hot baths, good sleep, friendship, and the contemplation of truth. Hot baths to eternal truth. In the same treatise, treated with the same seriousness. This is profoundly, recognizably Catholic. And then there's the phrase attributed to St. Ignatius, quote, act as if everything depended on you, trust as if everything depended on God, end quote. Work hard, exhaust yourself, and then don't neurotically obsess over the outcome. That's where trust comes in. Oscar Wilde, who converted on his deathbed, put it this way, quote, to cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul, end quote. No radical split, no war between flesh and spirit. A conversation. Number 5, the appreciation for beauty, wherever it may be found. If the body matters, if the incarnation means anything, then beauty is not just a decoration. It is a path of access to truth. The Protestant Reformation, especially in its Calvinist form, tended to empty churches. Images were suspicious, the sensory was dangerous, potentially idolatrous, right? Strip it away, simplify. Catholicism responded with the Baroque. More images, more forms, more splendor, more overwhelming, dazzling, almost aggressive beauty. And this wasn't a betrayal of spirituality, it was its coherent expression. Because the sensible is not opposed to the intellectual. The body is not the enemy of the soul. On the contrary, beauty can draw us more deeply into truth than any argument ever could. Someone always raises the moral objection. Why spend money on a crown for the Virgin or on a magnificent altarpiece when that money could go to the poor? Here's the thing. That objection appears in the gospel itself. When a woman pours very expensive perfume over Jesus, someone protests that the money could have been better spent on the poor. And who is it that raises that objection? Judas. And Jesus replies, quote, "You will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me." End quote. See, it's not a comfortable line, but it makes clear that beauty, loving excess, the gratuitous gesture, these are not outside the Christian horizon. They are a part of it. Number 6, and this is the one that holds basically all the others together. Forgiving, even yourself, and moving forward. Think about what points 1 through 5 require. I can trust the other only if I can forgive him. I can truly attend to the person in front of me only if I don't condemn them forever for their failings. I can keep reasoning with someone only if I don't reduce them to their worst moment. Forgiveness is not a cute add-on. It is the load-bearing foundation. And here the contrast with the Puritan mentality, both historic and contemporary, is enormous. Puritanism does not truly forgive. It demands purity. If it detects a stain, it pronounces a sentence. And I want to be clear. I think wokeness is contemporary secularized Puritanism. The culture of cancellation, the demand for absolute purity, the refusal to grant rehabilitation, the transformation of apology into public humiliation rather than reconciliation, this is essentially Luther's simul justus et peccator, but without the grace. All condemnation, no transformation. Against this, Catholicism says, yes, you are a sinner, but you are not fixed forever in your sin. The figure I love the most to illustrate this is Saint Andrew Wouters, a Dutch priest in the 16th century whose personal moral life was, by any conventional standard, a disaster. Womanizer, heavy drinker, not who you'd put on the brochure. And then the Calvinist persecution came, and they offered him his life in exchange for renouncing the church. He refused. He was killed alongside the others. His famous line, quote, "Fornicator I always was, heretic I never was," end quote. There is the whole Catholic logic in one sentence. You can have lived badly and still be sanctified. You are not sealed forever by your worst version. The Puritan runs the opposite risk, being pure as an angel and proud as a demon. The Catholic knows they are broken. That's not a problem to be solved. It's the very starting point of a good life. Now, every time I talk about this, someone comes up to me and says, everything you've described makes sense. I find myself drawn to Catholicism more and more, but I want to actually believe. I don't want to stay at the level of cultural Catholicism or Catholic atheism. I want to be simply Catholic. And to you, I want to say something. You know Pascal's wager, right? If you believe and God doesn't exist, you've lost a little. If you don't believe and God does exist, you've wagered everything. Probabilistic prudence alone suggests believe. But Pascal immediately runs into an obvious problem. Someone says, okay, you've convinced me. Rationally, I should believe. But I just don't. What do I do? And here Pascal introduces one of his strangest and most brilliant ideas, abêtissement. It's kind of untranslatable. Abêtir means to make yourself like a beast, stupefy yourself. The kids today might call it retard maxing. What Pascal means is start with the action. Begin by doing it. Go to mass, kneel, pray, even if you don't believe yet, even if it feels hollow. Start with the gesture. Far from being naive, this connects directly to everything we've discussed. The incarnation, the importance of the body, the unity of soul and gesture. Understanding is not only formulating an internal theory, it is also knowing how to act in accordance with what something is. Philosopher Elizabeth Anscombe, a disciple of Wittgenstein, illustrates this beautifully. She says, when a little girl goes to Mass and learns to kneel, to stand, to fall silent at the consecration, she probably cannot yet explain transubstantiation in scholastic terms, but she is already understanding it in practice. The body learns before the mind catches up. And then there's Lope de Vega's Lo fingido verdadero, the feigned truth. A pagan actor is tasked with portraying a Christian in order to mock Christians. He plays the role, he inhabits it, and by virtue of acting as a Christian, he converts. What is feigned becomes true. Some might say, fake it till you make it. There's a short film by Isabelle Coixet called Bastille that has the same structure in a completely secular register. A man is about to leave his wife. Then he discovers she has leukemia. Out of compassion, he decides to keep acting as if he were still in love with her, going through the motions, the tenderness, the attention. And by acting that way, he falls back in love for real. Acting as if transforms what you are. This is why I find so compelling the inversion Ratzinger proposed of the modern formula. Grotius used the phrase et si Deus non daretur, as if God did not exist, to build a secular political order. Bonhoeffer picked it up in another direction, and Ratzinger asked simply, why not reverse it? Why not try living as if God existed, even without full faith, even with doubt? Try it. See what happens. Because if the incarnation means anything, if flesh, body, gesture, matter, action genuinely matter, then the gap between acting Catholic and being Catholic is not a wall, it's a threshold. So, to pull it all together, the Catholic way of life, this sentire católico, this Catholic atheism, this form of life, stands against three things in particular. Against Gnosticism, any version of Christianity that separates knowledge from the body, spirit from matter, truth from flesh. Against Puritanism, the tendency to absolutize purity, to cancel without redemption, to confuse cleanliness with holiness. And finally, against Islamic-style monotheism, insofar as it insists on a God so absolutely one and undivided that plurality itself becomes suspect. Against all three, Catholicism offers a way of life, a mode of being, a structure of attention, trust, reason, beauty, and forgiveness. That's it. As a conclusion, I would like to thank Miguel Ángel Quintana Paz for producing the conference titled Cómo ser católico aunque no creas en Dios, which this video is a translation and adaptation of. I definitely recommend you check that out if you found this interesting. And once again, I invite you to, check out our Patreon, to support us in any way that you can. It really, really means a lot, and it allows this project to keep moving forward. Anyways, if this video made you think, please consider sharing it with someone who would argue with you about it. That would be very Catholic of you. See you in the next one.